Welcome to Collecting Chaos. My name is James, and today we're going to talk about what kind of comic books do you collect and how do you protect them. Before I do that, before we get started on that, let me talk for a second about where I've been and why I haven't uploaded anything. Well, I didn't have internet for 7 days. That's what happened. And I know some of you are going, but you still had a short every day. I upload my shorts. I upload my shorts. I upload the short videos once a week, 7 of them to cover the 7 days. And that's why Tuesday's video was so late coming out, because Tuesday is the first day that I upload them. So that's why that happened. And yeah. So anyway, what kind of comic books do you collect and how do you protect them? We'll get to that right after this. Now, I'm not talking about collectors who prefer slabs over other types of protection, or the investors or speculators or other types of collectors. And I'm not talking about genre specific, such as superhero, western, romance, funny animal, or underground, or even adult comics. I'm talking about what kind of collector are you? Do you collect modern comics? Silver, gold, pre-gold? Maybe you only collect mainstream Marvel comics, or mainstream DC comics, or mainstream DC and Marvel. And everything else is independent and you don't care about it. But I don't see what so independent about Dell and Gold Key. They were a powerhouse in their time. And Dark Horse, Image, and several other modern companies, I don't think they should be considered independent. For some reason, if it isn't Marvel or DC, it's independent as far as most collectors are concerned. Perhaps they mean independent of the big two, but then why is Archie still considered an independent company even though they've been around for nearly as long as Marvel and DC? Interesting thought there, don't you think? Now, for the most part, collectors today collect modern comics. Well, that is to say, modern sized comics. And they generally measure between 10 and a quarter inches tall, 6 and 5/8 inches wide. And they include pretty much everything published after 1975. Now, I know that I'm going to take some flack for that, because you got to remember, this is modern size comics and not necessarily modern age. And I know people are going to say, I collect Bronze Age comics and they're from the late 70s. They're from 77, 78, 79. Even from the early 80s, you got Bronze Age comics. But they're modern sized comics, okay? You got to get the size part of it right. And I've got a couple of comic books from 1946. Matter of fact, some of the Daredevil comics that I have from 1946, not Marvel's Daredevil, the original Daredevil, they're 6 and 5/8. They've not been trimmed. At least I have not been able to detect any trimming on them at all, other than what was done at the factory. Are they modern? No, they're Golden Age. But I classify them as modern sized because they're 6 and 5/8. Next, we'll have bronze sized comics. That's what I'm going to call it, is bronze sized comics. And they generally include, well, of course, 10 and a quarter inches tall, because pretty much every comic's 10 and a quarter inches tall. But they might be 6 and 3/4 or 6 and 7/8 inches in width. And they were generally published between 1970 and 1976. But a lot of the independent companies in the 80s also used that size. So your mileage may vary, but I call those bronze-sized comics because that's what they were primarily at. Now, the page counts on those comics published from about 1970 on is generally 32 pages plus the cover for a total of 36 pages or 9 leaves. Now, silver-sized comics are generally 10 and a quarter inches tall, of course, and 7 inches wide, and are also 32 pages most of the time. Now, while I do own comics, again, going back in the 40s, that are 7 inches wide, they're the exceptions and not the rule. And generally, the silver-sized comics include anything published from 1950 to 1970. Of course, Dell and Gold Key are exceptions to that rule because, yeah, they were bigger. We'll get into that in a few minutes. Again, this is silver sized, not silver age. And again, publishers in the 80s, independent publishers in the 80s, I'm going to call them small press publishers in the 80s, used the 7-inch size as well. Golden sized comics were 7.25 inches wide, generally. Of course, 10.25 inches tall, just like pretty much every other comic, which is an interesting thing because if you have a comic that's 10.125 inches tall instead of 10.25, it's probably been trimmed. Something to think about. But the 7.25 inches, and they'd range from 32 to 64 pages and would often include the cover as part of the page count. I have comics that say 52 pages. But you know what? If you count the pages, you only got 12. 12 is 48. So where'd they get 52? They count the cover. And those comics in general, they would have a cartoon on the inside, or a strip on the inside and a strip on the back as well. So there was a reason they did that. These comics were published generally from 1935 to about 1950. But of course, Dell and Gold Key used that size right up into the 60s. So there you go. Platinum sized and older comics, they vary so widely in size, and I have not enough data or knowledge to really talk about them, so I'm leaving them out of this video. So now that we have identified the sizes, let's talk about comic book bags. And there are many sizes of comic book bags, including modern, regular, silver, silver gold, gold, and thick gold, and an abundance of boards for each size that may or may not fit appropriately. There's also a paperback size, a digest size, magazine size, thick magazine size, treasury size, life magazine size. With so many choices, how do you know what to use? Well, many collectors, myself included, will option for a single size or several sizes and stick with those as they make the boxes look tidy. In general, that is either the regular or silver size, as they will fit pretty much anything published after 1960, with the exception of some giant-sized, 80-page giants, and of course the 100-page spectaculars and the Dell and Gold Key stuff. And then they'll choose the backing board, which is appropriate size for the bag. Now, some collectors will use 2 or even 3 backing boards per bag. I found for my own needs, a single 24-point backing board is more than sufficient. But what kind of bags should you use? Well, you got 2 choices. That's it. Just two. You get polyethylene or polypropylene. That's it. We don't need to talk about anything else. Polyethylene or polypropylene. What? Mylar? Want to use Mylar bags? Well, let me tell you about Mylar. Mylar is simply biaxially oriented polyethylene terephthalate, also known as PET or simply polyester. This means that the film was stretched in several different directions while treated, while being heat treated, and that gives the bag additional strength and clarity, as well as some other properties that I'll go into a little bit later. But there's also oriented polypropylene bags, which have some of the similar properties to Mylar, but they don't have a cute name, so they're just OPP bags. And I'm slowly becoming a big fan of these as they have a lower cost and seem to provide similar protection and clarity to the Mylar as far as I can tell at this point. Mylar, of course, is a registered trademark of the DuPont Corporation. And I think it's important for me to mention that. One thing, there's a difference between a bag and a sleeve. A bag has a flap. A sleeve doesn't. It's open. But, you know, I tend to use the terms interchangeable, even though they aren't. Generally, Mylar or the OPP I will refer to as sleeves, even though they're bags. And the basic polypropylene and polyethylene I'll refer to as bags. It's just the way, yeah, I'm stupid like that, okay? Now let's talk about the pros and cons of each one. This is based on my experience with them, okay? Polyethylene bags are good for short term. They're a little cloudy and tend to yellow and deteriorate over time. If you've ever run across a stash of comics from the 70s and 80s and the bags stick together and have started yellowing, they're most likely polyethylene. They should be changed every 5 to 10 years, depending on the storage conditions. You know, the better you store them, the longer they might last. And the cost is low, and between 4 and 10 cents a piece per bag, and generally they're sold in packs of 100. Polypropylene bags are also good for short term storage, and they do tend to wrinkle after about 6 or 8 months when you stand them up vertically, like in a comic box, and should also be changed periodically, as they can deteriorate over time as well. I've actually seen them start to go brittle and fall apart. So, yeah, you change them every 5 to 10 years, depending on storage conditions. And their cost is also low, 5 to 10 cents a bag, generally sold in 100 or even in bulk lots of 1,000. Mylar. Mylar sleeves and bags are good for long-term storage. They maintain their clarity, then do not appear to break down over time. I have some Superman comics that were in Mylar sleeves for over 30 years. The only reason I changed them out to Mylar bags was because I was getting paper cuts when I was thumbing through them and I got tired of it. So they're a little more expensive, but you know, they're probably worth it. They're chemically inert and they're resistant to oils, solvents, and grease. And the cost ranges between 20 and 70 cents each. But this depends on the company you buy them from, of course. and they're generally sold in varying quantities from 50 to 100 or in bulk. OPP bags, now this is the oriented polypropylene bags, they're relatively new, and only time is really going to tell how they hold up. For clarity, they seem to be on a similar level to Mylar. OPP plastic is resistant to acid, alkalis, and organic solvents. It is anti-scratch and can withstand some wear and tear. And the cost is between 5 and 8 cents each, and are generally sold in bags of 100 or bulk lots of 1,000. Let's talk about top loaders. Top loader sleeves, and the reason I say sleeves is, of course, they have no flap. These are plastic holders that should not be used without first placing in the comic in one of the bags or sleeves I talked about previously. I recently discovered a Sports Illustrated magazine that I had placed in a top loader back in the 90s. The cover was stuck to the inside of the top loader. Now, they make great display holders, and they can generally replace the need for a backing board and allows you to see both the front and the back. But the prices vary. They seem to be between $2 and $3 each, though, and they're generally sold in packs of 10. Let's talk about backing boards. Backing boards are pretty much personal preference as to the manufacturer, so long as they are fully impregnated with calcium, but don't matter much other than that. You just make sure that whatever backing board you use, it's 1/8 of an inch smaller than the bag size if you're using 24-point boards. And if you're using like 48 or 56 point boards, you want them a 1/4 inch smaller than the bag size, especially for 56 point boards. I know. 56 point boards. Who in their right mind would use 56 point boards? I do. Not for my regular comics, but I get them for Treasury or Life magazine, and I generally stick with the Life magazine size. Here, let me show you one. This is a Treasury-sized edition of the Action Comics #1, Famous First Editions. This was the very first DC Famous First Edition or Treasury-sized comic. And as you can see, it's pretty sturdy with that 56-point board. The 24-point boards I have, they're flimsy, they flop around. They just don't protect the comic the way I want it to be protected. So, yeah. And that's not for sale, by the way. Now let's talk about interleave paper. And this is used by a lot of collectors for their newsprint comics, as well as like CGC puts them in their board in their in the comics when they're slabbing them. I don't know if CBCS does or not. I imagine they do because it helps to absorb the acids in the comics. And ideally, you would want one sheet per page. It gets really expensive really fast. 1 to 3 sheets on your more valuable books is all you really need. And you don't need any really for anything published after 1990. They went to better quality paper, and you really only need the interleave paper for newsprint, which deteriorates so quickly. They're going to run you 40 to 60 cents a sheet, and you can get them in quantities 25, 50, or 100. But you can also buy them by a roll of it and cut your own. And you'll get a significant savings doing it that way. So, what kind of collector are you? Do you collect by size or age? Or are you like me, a comic book hoarder that pretty much collects every type, every size, every company that crosses through my hands? Uh, I sometimes have trouble letting things go, but I've been selling a lot of my Marvels. And how do you protect them? Do you use the cheap bags and boards and change them every few years, which is going to cost you more money in the long run? Or is that even something you've thought about? Hopefully, this video has given you some insight into the different sizes of comics based on the year of publication and what's available in order to protect them for those of us that do not prefer encapsulation of our treasures. Don't forget, like and subscribe if you're not already. And if you like this video, recommend it to a friend. And you know what? I'll see you on Friday when I release another video. And also Friday night on Horizon Picks channel, I'll be back on the auction on his, I'll be back with him. I'll have a link at the end of the video, and of course there's a link down in the description below. So take care, everybody, and we will see you Friday. Bye.